You know how sometimes you stumble across a story, maybe about a place you've never even heard of, but it sticks with you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of what happened when we started looking into this tiny Swiss village, hidden away high up in the Alps. So today we're doing a deep dive into Albanen, for many, I think, a truly unseen destination.
Yeah, definitely unseen for most. It's perched way up in the Valais Canton, Albanese. Sits on this amazing south-facing slope, about 1,300 meters up. So what's that, like 4,300 feet?
High up.
Very. And you have to picture it.
Yeah.
Classic Swiss mountain village vibe, beautifully kept old houses made of dark larch wood, these tiny winding stone alleys. It's so special, actually. It's officially recognized on the inventory of Swiss heritage sites.
It sounds idyllic, honestly. It just paints such a perfect picture. But, well, like a lot of these seemingly perfect remote places, Albanen was facing a pretty serious challenge, wasn't it? A kind of turning point.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story many rural communities know well, sadly. Albanen was really grappling with a shrinking population.
Yeah.
Younger folks were leaving, looking for jobs, different kinds of opportunities elsewhere. And that meant the village was getting older, demographically speaking.
Mm.
It got so bad that the village school actually had to close its doors around 10 years ago. Just not enough kids.
Wow. A closed school in a place like that. That's a really powerful image, isn't it? It sort of says it all.
It really does. And, this isn't just Albanen's problem. You see this pattern globally, this sort of brain drain from rural areas as young people head to cities for education or careers. Albanen's solution is specific, sure, but the underlying problem, that's universal. How do you keep these places alive and vibrant?
So Albanen didn't just let it happen. They decided to fight back, essentially.
Exactly. They didn't just sit back. They chose a really bold path, quite innovative, actually. Starting in 2023, they rolled out this program offering actual financial incentives for people willing to pack up and move there.
Money to move there. Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. It actually came out of a rescue package they voted on way back in November 2017.
Ah, okay. So it had been brewing for a while.
For sure. The numbers were stark. Over the previous 80 years or so, they'd lost about 100 residents, and of the folks left, well over half were elderly. So, yeah, the situation felt pretty urgent.
A rescue package involving cash incentives.
Mm.
Okay, let's dig into that. What exactly were they offering? What kind of money are we talking about?
Well, the figures were designed to get noticed, no doubt about it. They offered CHF $25,000 per adult. At the time, that was roughly $27,500 US.
Okay, per adult.
Per adult. And for couples, naturally double that. So CHF 50,000, which is around 55,000 USD.
55,000.
And then on top of that, if you had kids, they offered an extra CHF 10,000 per child. So another, 11,000 US dollars or so for each kid?
Wow. Okay, those are pretty eye-watering sums. Enough to seriously make someone think about relocating to the Swiss Alps for sure. But I'm sensing a but coming. There must have been some pretty strict conditions, right? It couldn't have been that simple.
You are absolutely right. No, it wasn't just show up, get money. There were some significant conditions attached. Big ones.
Like what?
Okay, first off, the investment. New residents had to commit to investing a pretty hefty sum, at least CHF 200,000.
200,000 Swiss francs.
Yep. Which translates to something like 241,000 or 242,000 US dollars. And that had to be invested in either buying property in Albanen or doing significant renovations on an existing one. Plus, you had to prove you actually had the financing sorted before applying.
Okay, so 240 grand. I mean, that's a lot, but maybe in the Swiss property market, does that kind of target a specific income bracket, do you think?
That's a really good point. It suggests they weren't just trying to get anyone, but specifically people, maybe families, who had the financial means to, put down roots and really invest long-term in the community. It wasn't aimed at people just looking for a handout.
Makes sense. What else? Any other hoops to jump through?
Oh, yeah. There was an age limit. You couldn't be older than 45 when you applied.
45. Okay. So aiming for younger families, maybe?
Seems likely, yeah. And then the commitment aspect. Anyone who got the money had to promise to live in Albanen for a minimum of 10 years.
10 years?
10 years. If you decided to leave before that decade was up, guess what? You had to pay the whole subsidy back.
Okay, that's a serious commitment. 10 years is a long time to plan your life around.
It absolutely is. It weeds out anyone who isn't serious, I suppose.
And I guess there were rules about nationality or residency status, too. You couldn't just be like an American tourist who fancies staying.
Exactly. And this is probably the biggest hurdle where most of that initial buzz kind of fizzled out. You needed to have either a Swiss passport,
Right.
or what's called a permanent residence permit. It's the Category C permit.
Category C, what does that involve, roughly?
Well, a C permit basically gives a foreign national the right to live and work in Switzerland indefinitely. It's like permanent residency elsewhere, but getting one usually requires living there legally for several years already, showing your integrated, sometimes language skills. It's not something you get easily or quickly.
So, yeah, definitely not a case of just arriving and claiming your welcome money.
Right.
No tourists allowed for this deal.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
That filtered out a huge percentage of the initial inquiries.
Okay, so it makes sense now why it wasn't just a free-for-all. But thinking bigger picture, why go through all this effort? What was the real fundamental drive behind this whole plan?
Well, it circles back to that core problem we talked about, the demographic crunch.
Yeah.
The steady stream of young people leaving, the aging population left behind.
Right.
I think I read that when they came up with the plan, there were only about 25 residents under the age of 25 in the whole village.
25?
That's
tiny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the aim wasn't just about getting more bodies in the village, bumping up the population stats. It was deeper than that.
It had to be about more than just filling houses.
Right. Precisely. It was about breathing new life, new energy into Albanen. They hoped to bring in more diversity, new ideas, and really importantly, give the local economy a boost.
And the school? Was reopening the school a big part of it?
Oh, absolutely. That was a key goal. They figured attracting young families, getting kids back into that empty schoolhouse was crucial for the village's long-term survival and, well, making it feel like a living community again.
Makes total sense.
And I think they also saw it, perhaps optimistically, as a potential model. Something other small towns or villages facing similar problems might look at.
A blueprint for rural revitalization, maybe. So how did the world react when this pretty unusual plan got out? I bet it made some headlines.
Headlines is putting it mildly. It went, well, viral, pretty much. The mayor mentioned getting something like 3,000 contacts. Yeah, from basically every continent. People were reaching out through every channel imaginable: phone, email, text, WhatsApp, Facebook, the village website. Just an absolute flood of interest.
Wow. 3,000?
Yeah.
That's probably more people than actually lived there at the time. What must that have felt like for the local council? Just chaos.
I imagine it was pretty overwhelming, yeah. A tiny village administration suddenly fielding thousands of global inquiries.
Incredible. But what about the people in Albanen, the locals who were already there? How did they feel about this sudden global spotlight and the plan itself? Was everyone on board?
Well, interestingly, the reaction within the village was a bit more complex.
Yeah.
Not everyone was immediately thrilled. There was actually some alarm, maybe even a bit of distrust initially.
Oh, why was that?
Some residents felt that the press, the media reporting on it, had maybe oversimplified the whole thing or even distorted it a bit. They worried it was giving people false hope, making it sound like anyone could just move there and get a load of cash without highlighting all those really tough conditions we just talked about.
Yeah.
There was a concern that people were being misled, basically.
And looking at those conditions, the huge investment, the C permit, the 10-year commitment, it sounds like those concerns were pretty justified.
Absolutely. The reality check was quite stark. As I mentioned, the mayor estimated that something like 99% of those initial 3,000 contacts didn't actually meet the requirement.
99%.
Yep. So you had all these people dreaming of this subsidized life in a beautiful Swiss village, but they hadn't grasped the very real financial and legal barriers. It must have been a real letdown for a lot of them.
So despite that massive initial wave of interest, the actual number of people likely to successfully move there through the program was expected to be, well, quite small.
Very small, yes. The council apparently anticipated, maybe optimistically, 5 to 10 families taking up the offer over the next 5 years.
5 to 10 families.
Yet even that relatively low number they considered would be a success given the challenges.
Right. It really puts it in perspective. But even if it is just a handful of families, what kind of impact could that potentially have on Albanen's future?
Well, even on that smaller scale, if it works, it could genuinely make a difference. It could help revitalize the place. New families mean kids for the school, hopefully, more customers for any local shops or services.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, new residents bring different perspectives, maybe new ideas, a bit more cultural diversity. All of that could contribute to making Albanen feel more vibrant, more dynamic, and ultimately more sustainable in the long run.
And maybe inspire others too.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It could serve as a case study, maybe encourage other villages dealing with population decline to think outside the box, try creative solutions.
Okay, so beyond this really interesting, if very selective incentive scheme, what else is the draw? If someone does meet all those criteria, or maybe someone just wants to visit, what makes Albanen appealing in its own right?
Oh, definitely. Even without the cash offer, Albanen has a lot going for it. First off, the location itself is just stunning. Very calm, incredibly sunny, tucked away in the Valais region, which is already a big tourist draw.
Right, the Valais. Famous area.
Exactly. And it's surprisingly well connected for a mountain village. You've got easy access to some of the really big-name Swiss Alps resorts like Zermatt, Saas-Fee, Verbier, and even closer, just a 15-minute drive, is Leukerbad.
Leukerbad, the spa town.
That's the one, famous for its thermal hot springs and pools, so you've got that right on your doorstep.
So not completely cut off then, easy to get around.
Not at all. There's a regular bus service that connects Albanen down to Luque. It takes about 20 minutes. And from Luque, you can tap right into the main Swiss train network. The bus also goes directly up to Leukerbad.
Okay. What about outdoor stuff? Hiking?
Oh, yeah, loads. It's the Alps. There's a huge network of hiking trails all around. One really famous, maybe slightly notorious feature is the Albanen Ladder.
The Albanen Ladders? What's that?
It's literally a series of sturdy, near-vertical wooden ladders fixed to the cliff face. Historically, it was actually the main, most direct route connecting Albanen down to Leukerbad. Bit of an adventure, I'd imagine.
Ladders up a cliff face. Wow. Okay, maybe not for everyone, but definitely memorable. What about winter? Skiing nearby?
Yep. There's a cable car that takes you up to the Rinderhut ski station that links into a wider ski area, offering over 50 kilometers of slopes. So, plenty for winter sports fans.
And in summer?
That same area transforms. Great for hiking, mountain biking. Apparently, you get these incredible panoramic views across the Swiss, French, and Italian Alps from up there. You can see loads of those famous 4,000-meter peaks.
Sounds spectacular. And you mentioned earlier it's architecturally special, too, the village itself.
Absolutely. It's really known as one of the best-preserved traditional mountain villages in Switzerland. You wander through, and it's all those narrow stone alleys, the centuries-old houses built from that dark larch wood. Real craftsmanship from generations ago. It feels very authentic. Even the village church, the original, was damaged in an earthquake. Apparently the newer one, while more modern, was actually designed really carefully to fit in, to harmonize with the look and feel of the old town.
So, wrapping things up then, Albanen tried this really bold, maybe audacious plan with financial incentives to fight population decline.
Yeah, a really daring move, but one that came with some very significant strings attached.
Right. The global reaction was massive, almost overwhelming, but the reality was that very, very few people actually qualified because of those strict rules. The investment, the permit, the age, the long-term commitment.
Exactly, a huge gap between the initial hype and the practical reality.
Yeah.
But still, the hope remains that even a small influx of new residents, the right kind of residents who are really invested, could genuinely help revitalize this incredibly beautiful and unique village.
It really highlights the complexity, doesn't it? Trying to save these special rural places. It's not just about getting people there. It's about finding the right people who can and want to contribute and commit for the long haul.
Precisely. It's a delicate balance.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. What does Albanen's story really tell us about the future of unique communities like this in, our increasingly connected, globalized world? Is this kind of incentive model something that could actually work elsewhere? Or are the challenges just too specific? What are the ethics, even, of essentially paying people to live somewhere?
That tension between preserving tradition, keeping that unique character, and needing to embrace change just to survive. It's fascinating.
It really is. Something for you, our listeners, to maybe ponder today. Perhaps it might even inspire you to look into other creative ways communities are trying to stay vibrant, or maybe just tempt you to explore the stunning Valais region of Switzerland yourself someday.
Could be worth a look.
Definitely. Until our next deep dive, keep seeking out those unseen destinations.